I'm Jessica Matthews, 37, and I never imagined my perfect life would shatter when I found my sister Rachel in bed with my husband Daniel. The betrayal was devastating enough, but nothing prepared me for what came next. Rachel announced she was leaving with Daniel, but dropping off one thing, her 8-year-old son Ethan, my nephew. He's dying of leukemia anyway, she said coldly. Consider it my parting gift. They walked out, leaving me with a supposedly terminal child and a broken heart. Before I continue this unbelievable story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit subscribe, and give this video a like if you've ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal. Before everything fell apart, I thought I had the perfect life. I worked as a marketing director at a respected firm in Chicago, lived in a beautiful suburban home with a garden I tended every weekend, and had been married to Daniel Parker for 10 wonderful years. At least I thought they were wonderful. Daniel worked as a financial advisor, and we enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle filled with dinner parties, weekend trips, and plans for our future family. That was our only struggle, trying to have a baby. For 5 years, we'd been on the infertility roller coaster. Failed IVF cycles, disappointing pregnancy tests, and the monthly heartbreak took a toll on both of us. Daniel seemed supportive, holding me through tears and reassuring me that we'd be parents someday one way or another. I believed him. My younger sister Rachel was always the wild card in my otherwise orderly life. 2 years younger than me, she lived impulsively, jumping from job to job, relationship to relationship. She envied everything I had. She told me so during one of her drunken confessions. "You've always had everything handed to you, Jessica. The grades, the stable career, the perfect husband. Some of us have to struggle." I didn't remind her that I worked through college while she dropped out, or that I spent years building my career while she quit jobs whenever they became challenging. That was just Rachel, perpetually the victim of circumstances that were largely her own creation. When Rachel got divorced from her third husband and needed a place to stay just for a few weeks, Daniel suggested we open our home to her and her son Ethan. I was hesitant, but family is family. Those few weeks turned into 4 months. Rachel rarely helped around the house, spent most days job hunting, which seemed to involve a lot of shopping, and often left Ethan in our care while she networked at bars. Ethan was a quiet, sweet boy who seemed used to taking care of himself. He never complained, even when he looked pale and tired. I noticed bruises on his arms occasionally, but Rachel dismissed my concerns. "He's just clumsy like his father," she'd say with irritation. I should have pushed harder. That Tuesday changed everything. I came home early from work with a migraine, wanting nothing more than to take medication and sleep it off. The house was quiet, which was unusual since Rachel typically played music loudly during the day. I assumed she was out and headed upstairs. The sounds from my bedroom made me freeze in the hallway. I knew immediately what was happening, but my brain refused to process it. I pushed the door open slowly, and there they were, my sister and my husband in our bed. They didn't even notice me at first. How long my voice was surprisingly steady as they scrambled to cover themselves. Daniel looked terrified. "Jessica, this isn't... it's not what you..." 6 months, Rachel interrupted, a strange smile on her face. "It just happened, Jess. We didn't plan it. 6 months. Half a year of lies." They'd been carrying on this affair since shortly after she moved in. While I was working late and going to fertility appointments alone because Daniel had clients, they were betraying me under my own roof. "Get out," I whispered. "Both of you get out of my house." Daniel started crying pathetic tears that made me feel nothing but disgust. "Jess, please, we can talk about this. I made a terrible mistake." Rachel laughed, actually laughed. "Don't be dramatic, Daniel. She was going to find out eventually. We might as well just tell her everything." That's when she dropped the second bomb. "We're leaving together. Tonight. Daniel's already packed his things." She gestured to the closet, where sure enough his suitcase stood ready. The room spun around me. "What about Ethan?" I managed to ask, thinking about the quiet little boy who was probably at school unaware his world was about to implode too. Rachel's face changed, then a calculated look I'd seen many times throughout our childhood when she was about to manipulate a situation. That's the thing, Jess. Ethan's sick. Really sick. Leukemia. Terminal, the doctors say. Daniel looked shocked. You said it was treatable, that he just needed. Rachel silenced him with a look. I'm setting you free, Jessica. You always wanted a child. Well, here's your chance. He probably won't last more than a few months anyway. I couldn't process what she was saying. You're abandoning your dying child to run off with my husband. I'm giving him to someone who can care for him better than I can. Consider it my parting gift. She started getting dressed as casually as if we were discussing dinner plans. Within an hour, they were gone. Rachel left a folder of medical documents on the kitchen counter and took everything else, including the emergency credit card I kept in my desk. Daniel emptied our joint checking account but left the mortgage in both our names. I sat in my kitchen surrounded by the ruins of my life until I heard the school bus stop outside. How was I going to explain to an 8-year-old boy that his mother had abandoned him and that the uncle he'd grown fond of had left too? How could I tell a dying child that the people who should love him most in the world had decided he wasn't worth staying for? Ethan walked in with his backpack dragging on the floor, looking more tired than any child should. Where's Mom? He asked, his eyes darting around the unusually quiet house. I made him a snack and sat him down, telling him as gently as I could that his mother and Daniel had to go away for a while and that he would be staying with me. I couldn't bring myself to tell him they weren't coming back. I couldn't tell him they had chosen each other over him. Because I'm sick, he asked quietly, his small face showing no surprise, only resignation that broke my heart. Mom says I'm a lot of work because of the doctor visits. I hugged him, this child who'd been dealt the worst hand imaginable. No, sweetie. You're not too much work. You're perfect exactly as you are. And we're gonna fight this together, okay? I didn't know then if I was lying to him. I didn't know if I could handle caring for a dying child while navigating my own grief. I only knew that I couldn't abandon him, too. The days after Rachel and Daniel left passed in a blur of shock, grief, and practicalities. I took emergency family leave from work, contacted a divorce lawyer, and most importantly, tried to understand Ethan's medical situation. The folder Rachel left contained medical records that were concerning but confusing. Ethan had been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia 8 months earlier, but there were large gaps in his treatment history. Appointments missed, prescriptions unfilled. I made an immediate appointment with the oncologist listed in his file. Dr. Melissa Winters was a kind but direct woman who seemed relieved to finally meet me. I've been trying to reach Miss Matthews for months, she explained, reviewing Ethan's chart. Ethan's condition is serious, but I'm concerned about the narrative you've been given. My heart pounded. What do you mean? She looked at me carefully. With proper treatment, Ethan has approximately a 85% chance of full recovery. His leukemia is aggressive but responsive to treatment. It's certainly not the terminal sentence you described. The room seemed to tilt. Rachel had lied about her son being terminal. She'd used his illness as an excuse to abandon him, probably, assuming I'd place him in foster care once he miraculously didn't die or that I'd be too overwhelmed to investigate her claims. The problem, Dr. Winters continued, is that his treatment has been dangerously inconsistent. He's missed critical appointments, medications haven't been administered properly, and his condition has deteriorated as a result. I looked at Ethan through the exam room window where a nurse was taking his vitals. His thin frame, the pallor of his skin, the bruising, all signs I'd noticed but hadn't understood. He wasn't dying from leukemia. He was getting sicker because Rachel had neglected his treatment. I'm his aunt, I explained. His mother just left him with me. I had no idea about any of this. Dr. Winter's expression softened with understanding. Well, Ethan needs immediate intervention. We should restart his chemotherapy protocol right away, and he'll likely need hospitalization initially to stabilize his condition. The next 3 months were the hardest of my life. Ethan was hospitalized for the first 2 weeks, receiving intensive chemotherapy that made him violently ill. I slept in a chair beside his hospital bed, learning medical terminology, administration of medications, and how to care for a child with a compromised immune system. Meanwhile, my own life was falling apart. Daniel had taken nearly everything from our accounts, leaving me with mortgage payments and now massive medical bills. Insurance covered some of Ethan's treatment, but Rachel had let many policies lapse, and as his aunt, rather than his legal guardian, I encountered endless bureaucratic obstacles. I returned to work part-time, grateful that my boss was understanding, but my income dropped significantly. I sold my car for a cheaper model, canceled every subscription and service I could, and still barely kept afloat. Amanda, my best friend since college, became my lifeline. She watched Ethan when I needed to work, brought groceries when I couldn't afford them, and held me when I finally broke down in tears after Ethan was asleep. "I don't know if I can do this," I confessed, one night exhausted after Ethan had spent hours vomiting from his latest round of treatment. "I'm not his mother. I don't know how to be what he needs." Amanda pushed my hair back from my face, her expression fierce with loyalty. "You're already what he needs, Jess. You showed up. You stayed. Do you know how rare that is in his life? He trusts you." It was true. Despite everything, Ethan and I were developing a bond. He was a remarkable child. Thoughtful, observant, and surprisingly funny once he began to trust that I wasn't leaving. Still, he asked about Rachel frequently. "When is Mom coming back?" He'd ask, his voice carefully neutral, as if preparing himself for disappointment. I never knew what to say. I wouldn't lie to him, but the truth seemed too cruel. "I don't know, honey, but I'm here and I'm not going anywhere." At night, after tucking Ethan in, I'd sometimes find social media posts from Rachel and Daniel, touring European cities, lounging on beaches, attending exclusive parties. They looked carefree and in love, with no sign of the destruction they'd left behind. In one photo, Rachel wore a necklace I recognized, a family heirloom from our grandmother that she must have taken from my jewelry box before leaving. The financial strain became unbearable. I took a second job doing freelance marketing work at night after Ethan was asleep. Some days I operated on 2 hours of sleep, fueled by coffee and necessity. I applied for every assistance program available, but the legal limbo of my guardianship status complicated everything. 4 months after they left, I received a call from Dr. Winters that changed everything. Ethan's responding exceptionally well to treatment, she told me, her voice warm with genuine pleasure. His latest blood work shows remarkable improvement. "What does that mean?" I asked, afraid to hope. "It means he's fighting and he's winning. We have a long road ahead, but if he continues responding like this, I'm very optimistic." That night, I watched Ethan sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks, his breathing, even his face relaxed. The weight of responsibility on my shoulders felt lighter somehow. We weren't out of the woods, but we could see a path forward now. Together. 6 months after Rachel and Daniel's departure, I received divorce papers in the mail. Daniel had filed in a different state, claiming 6 months of residency there. A lie, but just one of many. What shocked me most was the declaration that there were no children of the marriage and no custody issues to resolve. He had completely erased Ethan from the narrative, despite having lived with him for months and promised to be his uncle forever. I contacted my lawyer immediately. Sally Greenfield was a formidable divorce attorney who took one look at my situation and agreed to reduce her fees. "This is one of the most egregious cases I've seen," she said, reviewing the documents. "They've left you with nothing while trying to claim marital assets." Through Sally, I discovered that Daniel had been transferring money to separate accounts for months before leaving. He'd also been sending Rachel significant amounts of money that could have been paying for Ethan's medical care. "We're going after everything," Sally assured me, "and we're going to make sure the court knows about the child they abandoned." The divorce proceedings were complicated by Daniel's continued absence from the country. He communicated only through his lawyer, a slick man in expensive suits, who portrayed me as an obsessive wife unwilling to accept the marriage was over. They offered a settlement that would give me the house, but nothing else, not even Daniel's portion of the mortgage. "They're hoping the medical bills will force you to sell," Sally explained. Then they can come back to the country without facing consequences. Simultaneously, I began the process of legally adopting Ethan. I sent certified letters to Rachel at every possible contact point, informing her of my petition for adoption. She never responded directly, though her lawyer, yes, she had one too somehow, sent a coldly worded letter stating that she had no objection to temporary guardianship but reserved her parental rights. Translation: she wanted to abandon her son but keep the option to reclaim him if it ever became convenient. I documented everything: Ethan's medical neglect, Rachel's abandonment, the financial burden left deliberately on my shoulders. I had witnesses, doctors, nurses, teachers, and friends, all willing to testify about Rachel's absence and my dedication to Ethan's care. Through all of this, I tried to shield Ethan from the ugliness. But children know more than we think. One evening, while helping him with homework, he asked quietly, "Are you trying to become my mom?" My heart stopped. "I'm trying to make sure I can always take care of you legally. Would that be okay with you?" He considered this with the seriousness only an 8-year-old fighting cancer can possess. "But what about when my real mom comes back?" I chose my words carefully. "Ethan, I don't know if or when your mom will come back, but I want you to know that no matter what, you have a home with me for as long as you want one." He nodded, seeming satisfied with this answer. "I like living with you better anyway. You never forget my medicine." Throughout this period, Rachel and Daniel's social media presence became increasingly flamboyant. They attended film festivals in Cannes Fashion Week in Milan, exclusive parties in London. Rachel wore designer clothes and new jewelry in every photo. Daniel, looking tanned and carefree, appeared to have aged backward, free from the burden of our marriage and Ethan's illness. I made the mistake of showing these posts to my parents, hoping they would finally understand the situation. Instead, they were impressed. "They look so happy," my mother sighed. "Sometimes people just need to follow their hearts." "What about Ethan's heart?" I asked incredulously. "Their happiness is built on abandoning a sick child." My father shifted uncomfortably. "Rachel says you've been keeping Ethan from them, that you threatened to report them for neglect if they tried to contact him." I was stunned. "They left him. They haven't called once, sent a single card, or paid a dime for his medical care." "Well, there are two sides to every story," my mother said primly. I realized then that Rachel had been spinning narratives to our parents all along. In her version, I had somehow stolen her son and her husband, then driven them away. It was classic Rachel. Always the victim, never responsible. The stress became overwhelming. Between court appearances, hospital visits, work, and caring for Ethan, I was barely functioning. During one particularly difficult week when Ethan's treatment had intensified and my parents had sent me a scathing email about tearing the family apart, I completely broke down. Amanda found me on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m., sobbing uncontrollably while trying to muffle the sound so Ethan wouldn't hear. She helped me to bed, and the next day made an appointment for me with a therapist. Dr. Lillian Chen became my anchor in the storm. She helped me recognize the patterns of manipulation Rachel had subjected me to since childhood, and the way Daniel had exploited my trust and insecurities. More importantly, she helped me understand that none of this was my fault. "You're carrying trauma from your relationship with your sister that long predates this situation," Dr. Chen explained. "Rachel has spent a lifetime making you responsible for her happiness while resenting you for your success." With Dr. Chen's guidance, I began setting boundaries with my parents, limiting their access to information about Ethan until they could respect the reality of the situation. It was painful but necessary. The breaking point with my parents came when Ethan developed a serious infection that landed him in the ICU. Desperate and afraid, I called them. "Your grandson might not make it through the night. If you want to see him, come now." They arrived at the hospital 3 hours later, shocked by Ethan's condition. The doctors, nurses, and even the hospital social worker all knew me by name, greeting me with respect and compassion. My parents watched as I consulted with doctors, made informed decisions about Ethan's care, and comforted him during painful procedures. "You really have been taking care of him," my father said quietly as we sat in the ICU waiting room during a procedure. "What did you think I was doing?" I asked, too exhausted for anger. Rachel said. He began, then stopped. It doesn't matter what Rachel said. We should have seen for ourselves. It wasn't a full apology or acknowledgement, but it was a start. As Ethan fought through the infection and began to recover, my parents started to see through Rachel's deceptions. They didn't cut contact with her, but they began supporting me and Ethan in small ways, bringing groceries, sitting with Ethan so I could shower, offering to help with bills. It wasn't enough to heal the rift completely, but it was enough to give me hope that someday our family might find some kind of peace. 2 years after Rachel and Daniel abandoned us, Ethan's oncologist delivered the news we'd been praying for his cancer was in remission. We still faced regular checkups, maintenance medications, and the constant fear of relapse, but for the first time we could breathe. We could plan. We could hope. The legal battles had finally settled as well. My divorce was finalized with the court awarding me the house, a portion of Daniel's retirement funds, and additional compensation for Ethan's medical expenses after Sally presented evidence of Daniel's financial support of Rachel while abandoning his nephew's medical bills. The adoption was more complicated. Rachel finally responded to the court petitions, not contesting the adoption outright, but requesting visitation rights and input on major decisions. The judge, reviewing the extensive documentation of Rachel's abandonment and my consistent care, granted me full legal adoption with sole decision-making authority. Rachel was granted limited supervised visitation rights that she never exercised. With the worst behind us, I could focus on rebuilding our lives. My marketing career had suffered during the crisis, so I made a bold decision to change fields. Healthcare administration seemed a natural fit after spending so much time navigating medical systems. I took online courses while working part-time and eventually secured a position as a patient advocate at the very hospital where Ethan had received treatment. The job change meant stable hours, better benefits, and most importantly, a supportive work environment that understood my priorities as Ethan's mother. Yes, I finally allowed myself to use that word. I was his mother in every way that mattered. Ethan thrived once his health stabilized. Always bright, he blossomed in school once he had consistent attendance and support. His experiences made him unusually empathetic for a child his age, and he often brought home strays, both animal and human. "They need someone to care about them," he'd explain, bringing me a mangy kitten or a new friend who seemed to have no other place to go. It was through one of Ethan's hospital stays that I met Michael Cooper. A pediatric social worker with kind eyes and a quiet strength, Michael had helped us navigate insurance appeals during a particularly challenging period. He remembered Ethan's name, his medical history, and even his favorite comic book characters, using them to distract Ethan during difficult procedures. Our relationship developed slowly, cautiously. After Daniel's betrayal, I had built walls around my heart that seemed impenetrable. Michael never pushed content with coffee in the hospital cafeteria between his rounds and my shifts conversations about books and music rather than painful histories. "You're afraid," he observed one evening as we walked through the hospital parking lot. I understand why. I tensed, ready for the usual pressure, the insistence that I should move on or trust again that I'd heard from well-meaning friends. Instead, he continued, "I'm willing to wait until you're not afraid anymore. However long that takes." Tears filled my eyes. "What if it takes forever?" He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I've got time." Ethan approved of Michael immediately, a miracle given his natural wariness of male authority figures after Daniel's abandonment. "He looks at you the way people look at pizza when they're really hungry," Ethan observed after Michael had joined us for a movie night. "What does that mean?" I laughed. "Like you're the best thing ever and he can't believe his luck," Ethan explained with 10-year-old wisdom. As our relationship progressed, Michael integrated seamlessly into our lives, never trying to replace anyone but simply adding his own steady presence. He helped Ethan with science projects, taught him to fish, and sat with him through nightmares that still occasionally haunted him. Michael also supported my decision to maintain strict boundaries with my family. My parents had gradually become more involved in Ethan's life, but I kept emotional distance, unwilling to risk being hurt again. They never fully acknowledged the damage Rachel had caused, preferring to act as if she had simply moved away rather than abandoned her critically ill child. 3 years after Rachel and Daniel left, I received an expensive Easter basket for Ethan shipped from Switzerland with no personal note. The following Christmas, a package of designer clothes arrived all the wrong sizes. These sporadic gifts seemed designed to ease Rachel's conscience rather than bring any joy to Ethan. "Do you want these?" I asked him, about the latest delivery, a gaming system sent for his birthday 3 weeks late. Ethan considered the unopened box. At 11, he was old enough to understand the complexity of his situation. "Can we donate it to the kids at the hospital? They need fun stuff more than I do." I hugged him, amazed by his generosity. "Absolutely." That became our tradition, converting Rachel's occasional materialism into genuine charity. Designer clothes went to programs helping low-income families. Expensive toys were donated to the Children's Hospital. Each gift from Rachel became an opportunity for Ethan to experience the joy of giving. On Ethan's 12th birthday, Michael proposed to both of us. He got down on one knee in our backyard, presenting me with a simple but beautiful ring and offering Ethan a hand-carved wooden box containing a family medallion. "I want to be your husband," he told me, his voice steady. "And I want to be your father," he said to Ethan, "if you'll have me. We're already a family in all the ways that matter. I just want to make it official." We were married 6 months later, with Ethan standing as Michael's best man. During the ceremony, Ethan surprised us by asking to say something. He stood tall, his once frail body now healthy and strong. "When I was sick, Jessica saved me," he said simply. "Not just with medicines and doctors, but by loving me when the people who were supposed to love me left. Michael saved me too by showing me what a real father looks like." Today isn't just their wedding. It's the day we all choose to be a family forever. There wasn't a dry eye in the venue. 3 months after our wedding, I discovered I was pregnant, a surprise we had thought impossible given my history of infertility. Ethan was ecstatic about becoming a big brother, accompanying me to every appointment and talking to my growing belly about all the things he planned to teach his little sister. Lily Cooper was born on a spring morning, with Ethan holding my hand through the entire delivery. When the nurse placed her in my arms, I looked at my son and my husband, overwhelmed by the fullness of my heart. The family I had thought lost forever had been replaced by something even more precious, a family built on choice, commitment, and unshakable love. In a moment of weakness, I sent Rachel a birth announcement. Part of me still hoped that becoming an aunt might awaken something in her, some recognition of the joy she was missing. Her response was a designer baby outfit and a terse note, "Congratulations. She looks like our mother." Michael found me crying over the package. "What did you really want from her?" he asked gently. I considered the question seriously. I wanted her to be happy for me, to acknowledge that I've built something beautiful from the ruins she left behind. "She can't give you that," Michael said, taking my hand. "She'd have to admit what she did first." He was right, of course. Rachel could only see my joy through the lens of her own choices. Rather than face the consequences of her actions, she had spent years constructing elaborate justifications, portraying herself as the wronged party to anyone who would listen. When Ethan turned 13, he asked if he could add Cooper to his last name. "I want to have the same name as my sister," he explained, "and I want to be part of our family officially." We filed the paperwork, and Ethan Matthews became Ethan Matthews Cooper. It felt like the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. The wounds would always be there, but they no longer defined us. The years following our wedding passed with the beautiful ordinariness that once seemed impossible. Michael and I added another child to our family, a son, Noah, born 2 years after Lily. Our house, once a monument to betrayal and loss, filled with the noise and chaos of family life. Ethan, now a teenager, occasionally tested boundaries, as all adolescents do, but his rebellions were minor, staying out past curfew, arguing about homework priorities, typical teenage friction. What wasn't typical was the undercurrent of fear I sometimes caught in his eyes during our disagreements. the momentary panic that conflict might mean abandonment. I'm angry because I care I would remind him during these moments. Being family means we can disagree and still love each other completely. These reassurances became less necessary as time passed and our bonds strengthened. Ethan's experiences had left scars, but they had also given him unusual emotional intelligence and resilience. When Lily went through a phase of nightmares, it was Ethan who best knew how to comfort her. When Noah struggled with reading, Ethan showed infinite patience as a tutor. Ethan's interest in science blossomed into a passion for medicine. "I want to be like Dr. Winters," he told me one evening while completing a particularly challenging biology assignment. "I want to help kids who are scared like I was." I felt a surge of pride so intense it brought tears to my eyes. This remarkable young man who had every reason to be bitter about the hand life had dealt him, instead wanted to use his experiences to help others. The shadow of Rachel and Daniel never fully disappeared. Each year brought some reminder, usually in the form of extravagant impersonal gifts that arrived around holidays or birthdays. Ethan had long since stopped expecting anything meaningful from them, but occasionally he would ask questions about his birth mother. "What was she like when you were growing up?" he asked during a long drive to visit colleges when he was 16. I tried to be honest without being cruel. Rachel was complicated, charming, funny, the life of every party. But she struggled with taking responsibility for her choices. Was she always selfish? The directness of his question startled me. I considered my answer carefully. I think Rachel never learned how to balance her own needs with caring for others. When those things conflicted, she almost always chose herself. "Do you think she ever really loved me?" His voice was carefully neutral. My heart ached for him. "I think she loved you in the only way she knew how. But real love is about choices and actions, not just feelings. And her choices, they weren't what you deserved." He nodded, looking out the window. "I used to dream about her coming back, that she'd have some amazing explanation that would make everything okay. And now?" He smiled slightly. "Now I'm just glad things worked out the way they did. If she hadn't left, I wouldn't have you and Dad and the Rugrats. I wouldn't know what a real family feels like." I reached across to squeeze his hand, marveling at his wisdom. When Ethan was 17, we discovered through social media that Rachel and Daniel were no longer together. Posts showed Rachel at events with a series of different men while Daniel appeared to have moved to Australia. Neither attempted to contact us directly with this information. Around this same time, I learned through my parents that Rachel had been claiming to friends that Ethan had died. She'd apparently been telling this story for years, that her son had succumbed to leukemia and she'd fled the country in grief. The audacity of this lie left me breathless with anger. How could she, I demanded of my mother during a tense phone call. How could she tell people her son is dead when he's very much alive and thriving without her? My mother sounded uncomfortable. "I think she finds it easier than explaining why she left." "And you? Do you correct this lie when you hear it?" The silence on the other end of the line was damning. I made a difficult decision then. "Mom, until you're willing to acknowledge the truth about what Rachel did, I need to limit our contact. I won't have Ethan exposed to this toxic narrative." It was a painful boundary to set, but a necessary one. Michael supported me, fully holding me through tears, after difficult conversations with my parents. "You're protecting your son," he reminded me. "That's what good mothers do." By the time Ethan turned 18, he had been officially cancer-free for over a decade. We celebrated this milestone alongside his acceptance to medical school, achievements that seemed impossible during those dark days of treatment. At his high school graduation, Ethan gave the valedictorian address, speaking eloquently about resilience and chosen family. Watching him on that stage, confident, healthy, loved, I felt a sense of completion. We had survived the worst and built something beautiful from the ashes. Life settled into a rhythm that felt secure. My career in hospital administration had advanced to director level. Michael had been promoted to lead the pediatric social work department. Lily and Noah were thriving in school, developing their own unique personalities and interests. And Ethan was excelling in his pre-med program, his sights set firmly on pediatric oncology. I occasionally thought about Rachel and Daniel, wondering if they ever regretted their choices. Did they understand what they had given up? Did they realize that in trying to escape responsibility, they had missed the profound joy of watching Ethan grow into an exceptional young man? These questions had no answers, and gradually they became less important. Our family was complete without them. Their absence had long since stopped being a wound and had become simply a fact of our history, important in shaping us, but no longer defining us. When Ethan was accepted to medical school at 22, 15 years after his abandonment, we planned a family celebration to mark the occasion. My parents were cautiously invited, having slowly earned limited trust by finally acknowledging Rachel's abandonment and standing up to her lies. None of us could have predicted what would happen next. The day of Ethan's medical school graduation was perfect. Sunny but not too warm, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of early summer flowers across the university campus. 15 years had passed since that terrible day when Rachel and Daniel walked out, leaving me with a supposedly dying child. Now that child was Dr. Ethan Matthews Cooper, graduating with honors and headed for a prestigious pediatric oncology residency. Michael and I sat with Lily and Noah, now 12 and 10, in the family section. My parents had flown in from Arizona, our relationship cautiously rebuilt over years of difficult conversations and gradual understanding. We all wore matching Team Ethan buttons, an inside joke from his years of treatment, when we'd made similar buttons to wear during hospital stays. The ceremony was moving, especially when the dean mentioned graduates who had overcome significant personal challenges. Ethan had never used his history for sympathy or advantage, but his medical school application essay about his experience with cancer had apparently been so powerful that 3 faculty members had contacted me to express their admiration. When Ethan's name was called, our little section erupted in cheers. I caught his eye as he crossed the stage, and the smile we shared contained volumes. Acknowledgement of the journey, pride in the accomplishment, and profound gratitude that we had made it here together. After the ceremony, we gathered outside for photos. Ethan, in his regalia, surrounded by his siblings and parents, looking so grown up and accomplished that my heart felt like it might burst from pride. Jessica. The voice came from behind me, so familiar that my body recognized it before my conscious mind could process it. I turned slowly already, knowing who I would see. Rachel stood there looking both exactly the same and completely different. Her hair was shorter, elegantly styled, but with strands of gray she hadn't bothered to color. Designer clothes hung on a frame thinner than I remembered. Behind her, looking uncomfortable and significantly older, stood Daniel. Time seemed to stop. 15 years collapsed into nothing. I felt Michael step protectively closer to me, his hand finding mine. "What are you doing here?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Rachel smiled, that same calculating smile I remembered from childhood. "We came to see Ethan graduate, of course. My son, the doctor. I always knew he had it in him." The audacity stole my breath. Before I could respond, Ethan himself appeared at my side, his body language alert but composed. "Mom, is everything okay?" he asked me quietly, his eyes taking in the strangers who weren't strangers. Rachel's face changed, a flash of genuine emotion breaking through her polished exterior. "Ethan," she breathed. "Look at you, all grown up and so handsome." Ethan's grip on his diploma tightened. "Rachel," he said evenly, "this is unexpected." Not Mom, not even Mother. Just Rachel, like the name of a distant acquaintance. I saw the impact of this on her face, the first real consequence of her choices that she couldn't charm or manipulate away. Daniel stepped forward awkwardly. "Congratulations, Ethan. That's quite an achievement." "Thank you," Ethan replied formally, then turned to include Michael in the conversation. "This is my father, Dr. Michael Cooper. Dad, these are Rachel Matthews and Daniel Parker." The deliberate introduction made clear exactly where Ethan placed each of us in his life. Michael extended his hand professionally, though I could see the tension in his shoulders. "How did you know about the graduation?" I asked, finding my voice again. "Your parents told us," Rachel said smoothly. "We've stayed in touch over the years. They've kept us updated on Ethan's progress." I glanced at my parents, who looked uncomfortable but not apologetic. Another betrayal, but a smaller one this time, barely a pinprick compared to the wounds that had come before. "We should go," I said to my family. "We have reservations to celebrate." "Actually," Rachel interjected, her voice taking on a familiar, wheedling quality we were hoping to speak with Ethan privately. "It's important." Ethan's expression remained neutral. "Anything you need to say to me can be said in front of my family." Rachel glanced around at the busy graduation venue. "Perhaps somewhere more private. We've booked a conference room at our hotel." I started to refuse, but Ethan placed a hand gently on my arm. "It's okay, Mom. I'd like to hear what they have to say." His voice lowered so only I could hear. "I need this closure." How could I deny him that after everything he deserved, whatever answers they could provide? "We'll all go," Michael said firmly. "The kids can wait with Jessica's parents." And so we found ourselves in a plush hotel conference room, sitting across a polished table from the two people who had shattered our lives 15 years earlier. Ethan sat between Michael and me, poised and professional in his graduation attire. "You look wonderful," Rachel began. "Your grandparents showed us pictures, but they don't do you justice." "Why are you here?" Ethan asked directly. "You haven't attempted any meaningful contact in 15 years. Rachel's smile faltered. "I know how this must seem to you, but there were circumstances you don't understand. I've always kept track of you, always made sure you were doing well. Through occasional gifts and secondhand information," Ethan noted. "Never actually being present." Daniel cleared his throat. "We both have regrets about how things happened." "Do you?" I couldn't help asking. "Because from the outside it seemed like you were living your best lives while Ethan fought for his." Rachel's expression hardened. "You always were self-righteous, Jessica. Not everyone can be as perfect as you." "This isn't about Jessica," Ethan interrupted, his voice calm but authoritative. "I'd like to know why you're here now after all this time." Rachel and Daniel exchanged glances. "We need your help," Rachel finally said. "Daniel is sick. His kidneys are failing." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Michael spoke, his medical training evident in his tone. "What stage of renal failure are you on dialysis?" Daniel nodded. "Stage 4. I've been on dialysis for 8 months, but it's getting less effective. I need a transplant." Understanding dawned like a cold wave. "And you came looking for Ethan because he might be a compatible donor," I said, the pieces falling into place. "Family members are the most likely matches," Rachel said defensively. "It's a standard medical practice to check relatives first." Ethan sat very still, his expression unreadable. "Let me be clear," he said finally. "You abandoned me when I was fighting cancer, when I was supposedly dying according to what you told Jessica. You've made no meaningful attempt to be part of my life for 15 years. And now you've appeared at my medical school graduation because you need one of my organs." Rachel flinched. "When you put it that way, it sounds terrible." "Is there another way to put it?" Ethan asked. Daniel looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I told Rachel this was a bad idea approaching you like this. But I'm desperate, Ethan. My health has been declining for years. The waiting list for a non-related donor is years long." I watched my son process this information, marveling at his composure. The boy who had once been so frail was now a physician being asked to make a life-altering medical decision about the man who had abandoned him. "I'll need to see your medical records," Ethan said finally. "All of them. I'll consult with nephrology specialists I know. And I'll need time to consider." It wasn't the outright refusal I might have expected. It wasn't immediate forgiveness either. It was the measured response of the doctor Ethan had become. Analytical, thorough, and compassionate, even in the face of personal injury. Rachel's relief was palpable. "Thank you, Ethan. You don't know what this means to us. I haven't agreed to anything yet, Ethan reminded her. I've only agreed to review the case medically. As we prepared to leave, Rachel touched my arm tentatively. Could we talk privately for a moment? Michael and Ethan exchanged glances with me. It's fine, I assured them. I'll meet you at the elevator. When we were alone, Rachel's carefully maintained facade crumbled slightly. You did well with him, she said quietly. Better than I ever could have. That's not saying much, I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. I know you hate me, she continued. You have every right to. But I need you to understand something. I was drowning back then. Ethan's diagnosis, the constant hospital visits, the medications. I couldn't handle it. When Daniel and I got involved, it felt like an escape. Most parents don't get to escape their children's illnesses, I said. They stay and fight. I know that now, she whispered. I've had 15 years to understand what I threw away. I studied my sister's face, searching for genuine remorse. Did you really tell people he died? She had the grace to look ashamed. It was easier than explaining the truth. For you, I clarified. It was easier for you. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. For what it's worth, Daniel and I fell apart years ago. Turns out relationships built on betrayal don't last. We're only together now because of his medical situation. I felt no satisfaction at this news, only a bone-deep weariness. I'm sorry you're both suffering, but Ethan is my priority here, not your feelings or Daniel's health. Whatever he decides about the transplant, don't mistake medical compassion for forgiveness. Rachel wiped at her eyes. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want a chance to know my son again. He's not your son, I said quietly but firmly. He's mine. Biology doesn't make you a mother. Being there does. As I walked away to join my family, I felt the weight of 15 years of anger and resentment shifting slightly. Not disappearing, perhaps it never would, but transforming into something I could carry more easily. The day after graduation, we agreed to meet Rachel and Daniel again, this time at our home. Ethan insisted on this location. He wanted them on his territory, surrounded by the evidence of the life and family they had no part in building. Our house told the story of our journey photos, documenting Ethan's growth from a sickly child to a confident young doctor. Lily's artwork covering the refrigerator, Noah's soccer trophies lining a shelf. Michael and I beaming in family portraits. It was a visual testimony to what Rachel and Daniel had missed, what they had thrown away. They arrived precisely on time, Rachel clutching an expensive gift bag that Ethan accepted with polite detachment. Daniel looked noticeably worse than the day before, his skin gray beneath his tan, his movements careful and measured. My parents had insisted on being present, positioning themselves as mediators, though no one had asked them to play this role. The tension in our living room was thick enough to cut. I've reviewed your medical records, Ethan began, addressing Daniel directly. His voice held the professional tone I'd heard him practicing with classmates, compassionate but detached. Your condition is indeed serious. End-stage renal disease with complications from years of poorly managed hypertension and the nephrotoxic effects of immunosuppressants you've been taking for a previous health condition. Daniel nodded, looking both impressed by Ethan's clinical assessment and ashamed of his health decline. I've consulted with Dr. Ramirez at University Hospital, who specializes in renal transplantation. She's willing to evaluate you as a potential recipient. Ethan handed Daniel a business card. I've already forwarded your records to her office with your consent form. Rachel leaned forward eagerly. And the donor testing, when can we schedule that? Ethan's expression remained neutral. I'm willing to be tested for compatibility, but first I need some questions answered. The room fell silent. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying the two people who had once been central to his world. I want to know the truth. All of it. About why you left what you've been doing for 15 years and why you're really here now. Rachel glanced at Daniel, who nodded slightly. She took a deep breath. We ran out of money about 3 years ago, she began bluntly. The lifestyle we were living, it wasn't sustainable. Daniel made some bad investments, and my spending was out of control. We sold everything. The villa in Spain, the apartment in London. We've been living in a rented flat in Buenos Aires, barely scraping by on what's left of Daniel's retirement fund. So you came back because you're broke, I stated flatly. Not because you missed Ethan or regretted abandoning him. Rachel flushed. It's more complicated than that. Daniel started getting sick about 5 years ago. Chronic kidney disease at first, manageable with medication. But it kept progressing. When the doctors started talking transplant, I thought about Ethan immediately. 5 years ago, Ethan noted. Yet you made no attempt to contact me until now when the situation is critical. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I was ashamed. How do you approach someone you abandoned and ask for their help? With difficulty, I imagine Ethan replied evenly. There's something else you should know, Rachel said, her voice dropping. About your cancer. My body tensed immediately. Michael reached for my hand. I knew it was treatable, Rachel admitted, not meeting anyone's eyes. The doctors told me you had an excellent prognosis with proper care, but I used it as an excuse to leave. I told Jessica you were dying, because I thought she would eventually place you in foster care when she realized the burden I'd left her with. The calculated cruelty of this admission stunned the room into silence. My parents looked physically ill, their illusions about their younger daughter finally shattered completely. You lied about my son being terminally ill so you could run off with my husband, I said slowly, trying to process the enormity of this deception. You deliberately denied him proper medical care to make his condition appear worse than it was. I was in a dark place, Rachel whispered. I wasn't thinking clearly. That's not an explanation, Michael said, his voice tight with controlled anger. That's an excuse. Ethan leaned forward. What else have you lied about, Grandma? And Grandpa mentioned you told people I had died. Rachel couldn't meet his eyes. It was easier than explaining why I left. People judge mothers who abandon their children. If they thought you had died from cancer, they felt sorry for me instead of condemning me. You erased me, Ethan said quietly. You literally pretended I didn't exist anymore because it was convenient for your narrative. Daniel looked genuinely horrified. I didn't know about that. I swear, Ethan, I thought Rachel was staying in touch with you through your grandparents. Don't try to claim moral high ground now, I told him sharply. You emptied our bank accounts and left me to pay for Ethan's medical bills alone. You knew exactly what you were doing. My father, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. How could you do this, Rachel? Your own son. Rachel's composure cracked. Because I was drowning, because every day was a nightmare of hospitals and medications and watching him suffer, because I wasn't strong like Jessica. I couldn't handle it. And Daniel offered a way out. I offered comfort, Daniel corrected, looking pained. The affair was wrong, unforgivable. But leaving Ethan was your decision, Rachel. You told me he would be better off with Jessica. You were both adults making choices, Ethan interrupted. Choices that affected a child who had no say in the matter. He turned to Rachel. I was 8 years old and terrified. I thought I was dying and you left me. Do you have any idea what that does to a child? Rachel began to cry. Not the calculated tears I remembered from our childhood, but deep, ugly sobs that shook her thin frame. I have imagined it every day for 15 years, she managed between gasps. I have hated myself every single day. Not enough to come back, Ethan observed. Not enough to call or write a real letter. Not enough to support my medical care or education. I was afraid, Rachel admitted. Afraid you would reject me. Afraid of facing what I'd done. So I kept running. New cities, new friends, new distractions. Anything to avoid facing the truth. Daniel reached for Rachel's hand. When I got sick, it forced us to stop running. We had to face what we'd done, who we'd become. There was a long silence as we all processed these revelations. The complete selfishness of their choices was breathtaking, matched only by their audacity in returning now to ask for help. Finally, my mother spoke up. Rachel, Daniel, Do you understand that what you're asking isn't just a medical procedure? You're asking Ethan to undergo surgery, pain, and risk to save the man who helped destroy his childhood. You're asking forgiveness that you haven't earned. Rachel nodded miserably. I know. We have no right to ask anything of him. Ethan stood up, pacing the room, as he often did when thinking deeply. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady and clear. I took an oath yesterday to do no harm, and to relieve suffering where I can. As a physician, I cannot in good conscience refuse to be tested as a potential donor when someone's life is at stake. Even yours, Daniel. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Ethan. Ethan held up a hand. Don't thank me yet. Even if I'm a match, there's a rigorous psychological evaluation for living donors. The transplant team won't proceed if they believe there are unresolved emotional issues that could impact my well-being. And there clearly are. Rachel looked devastated. What can we do? For starters, you can be honest with everyone about who you are and what you've done, Ethan said firmly. No more pretending I died. No more fake narratives about Jessica keeping us apart. Just the truth. That you abandoned a sick child and his aunt stepped up to become his mother. Rachel nodded, wiping her tears. I will. I promise. And understand this, Ethan continued. If I do this, it won't be for you. It will be because it's the right thing to do medically. It doesn't mean I forgive you, and it certainly doesn't mean I want you back in my life. The stark boundary made Rachel flinch, but she nodded again. I understand. As the conversation wound down, my parents took Rachel and Daniel back to their hotel. The house felt cleaner somehow after they left, as if a long festering wound had finally been lanced. Are you really considering being his donor? I asked Ethan when we were alone. He smiled slightly. I have to be tested first. The odds of me being a match aren't as high as they're probably hoping. But yes, if I'm compatible, I'll consider it. Michael shook his head in wonder. You're a better person than I am. I don't think I could do it. Ethan looked at us both with the wisdom that had come from his journey. When I was sick, Dr. Winters told me something I never forgot. She said that healing isn't just about medicine. It's about finding a way forward that honors who you want to be, not just what happened to you. He touched the framed photo of himself in a hospital bed at age 10, grinning despite his baldness and gaunt face, Michael and I on either side of him. You two taught me what real parents look like, what real love is. That gives me the strength to make this choice from a place of power, not weakness. I hugged my son, overwhelmed by pride and love for the man he had become, despite everything, or perhaps because of it. 2 weeks after our confrontation, we received the results of Ethan's compatibility testing. The news wasn't what Rachel and Daniel had hoped for. Ethan was not a suitable donor match for Daniel. While they shared some genetic markers, several critical factors made a transplant between them ill-advised. When Ethan called to tell them, Rachel broke down in tears. What do we do now? She asked, desperation clear in her voice. True to his character, Ethan didn't simply deliver the news and walk away. I've already spoken with Dr. Ramirez, he explained. There are other options. The paired donor exchange program could work well for Daniel's case. I can help facilitate the process through my medical connections. Even now, facing the people who had abandoned him, Ethan chose compassion. Not forgiveness. He was careful to maintain that boundary, but the professional compassion of the doctor he had become. He had found a way to honor his medical oath without sacrificing his personal truth. While Daniel began working with the transplant team Ethan had connected him with, I found myself unexpectedly alone with Daniel in the hospital waiting room. He looked terrible. Years of hard living and advancing disease had aged him far beyond his 54 years. I never properly apologized to you, he said quietly, his eyes fixed on the linoleum floor. Not just for the affair, but for everything that came after. Taking the money, leaving you with all those medical bills, cutting contact completely. I studied the man I had once loved, trying to reconcile him with the stranger before me. Why did you do it, really? Daniel sighed deeply. The easy answer is that I fell in love with Rachel. But that's not the whole truth, I think. I think I was running from failure. Our fertility struggles, Ethan's illness moving into our house. It all felt like evidence that I wasn't the man I thought I was. Rachel offered an escape from facing my inadequacies. That's remarkably self-aware for someone who abandoned a sick child, I observed. He flinched. 5 years of dialysis gives you a lot of time to think. I've been in therapy for the last 3 years trying to understand how I could have done what I did. And do you understand it now? No, he admitted. I understand the psychological mechanisms, the cowardice, the selfishness, but I'll never truly comprehend how I could have left Ethan. Or you. He finally met my eyes. You deserved so much better, Jessica. Something shifted inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a release. Yes, I did. And I found it. Daniel smiled sadly. Michael seems like a good man. The best, I agreed. And a wonderful father to all 3 of our children. I'm glad, he said simply. Truly. As I walked away from that conversation, I realized I no longer carried anger toward Daniel. Pity, perhaps. Disappointment, certainly. But the rage that had once consumed me had burned itself out, leaving behind a cool clarity. Daniel would live with the consequences of his choices, just as I lived with the joy of mine. Rachel was another matter entirely. While Daniel had at least owned his actions, Rachel continued to cast herself as a victim of circumstances. She made repeated attempts to insert herself into our lives, showing up uninvited at our home, sending extravagant gifts to Lily and Noah, calling at odd hours with flimsy excuses. She's trying to buy her way back into the family, Michael observed after yet another delivery arrived. An expensive gaming system for Noah that was immediately donated to the children's hospital. Ethan, who had agreed to limited professional contact regarding Daniel's medical situation, grew increasingly frustrated with Rachel's boundary violations. Finally, he requested a meeting with just her away from Daniel's illness and the family dynamics. They met at a neutral coffee shop. When Ethan returned home afterward, he seemed lighter somehow. What happened, I asked, concerned by his unusual quietness. I told her the truth, he said simply. All of it. How it felt to be abandoned. How I used to cry myself to sleep wondering what I'd done wrong. How I thought I was being punished for getting sick. He ran a hand through his hair. I told her that while I wished her well, I had no desire for a mother-son relationship with her. That role has been filled beautifully and completely. He smiled at me then, the smile that still made my heart catch even after all these years. I told her you were my mom in every way that mattered. That Michael was my dad. That the family we built was real and whole and didn't have space for someone who saw me as disposable. Tears filled my eyes. How did she take it? She cried. A lot, Ethan shrugged. But I think she finally heard me. I told her I forgive her for my own peace, not for hers, and that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Through Daniel's medical connections, the hospital found a suitable donor match through the paired exchange program. The surgery was scheduled for the following month. Ethan, true to his word, consulted professionally on the case but maintained his personal boundaries. The day before Daniel's surgery, Rachel appeared at our door one last time. She looked different. Subdued, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, her makeup minimal. I won't stay long, she promised when I reluctantly invited her in. I just wanted to give you something. She handed me a small jewelry box. Inside was our grandmother's necklace, the family heirloom she had taken when she left 15 years ago. It belongs to you, she said quietly. It always did. Grandmother wanted you to have it, but I took it out of spite. I held the delicate gold chain with its small diamond pendant, remembering my grandmother wearing it at every family gathering. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched by this small act of restitution. Rachel nodded, not meeting my eyes. There's something else. I've been seeing a therapist. A good one, not just someone who tells me what I want to hear. She took a deep breath. I've been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. It doesn't excuse what I did, but it helps explain the patterns that led me here. I wasn't sure how to respond to this revelation. Are you getting help? Intensive therapy 3 times a week. She smiled sadly. Too late for us, I know. But maybe not too late for me to become a person who doesn't destroy everything she touches. As she prepared to leave, Rachel paused at the door. I want you to know something, Jessica. You were always the better sister, the better person. I was so consumed with jealousy that I couldn't see how lucky I was to have you in my life. And Ethan, her voice broke. He became an amazing man because of you, not despite me. That's the truth I have to live with. After she left, I sat in the quiet house, turning the necklace over in my hands. So many years of pain, so many what-ifs and might-have-beens distilled into this small, tangible object. I decided I would give it to Lily when she was older, with the full story of our family's journey. The betrayals and the healing, the losses and the gains. Daniel's transplant surgery was successful. He and Rachel returned to Argentina after his recovery, maintaining minimal contact through occasional emails updating us on his health progress. They never again tried to force their way into our lives, seemingly having finally accepted the boundaries Ethan had established. Life moved forward. Ethan thrived in his residency, specializing in pediatric oncology, with a focus on supporting families through the trauma of childhood cancer. Lily entered high school with dreams of becoming an artist. Noah discovered a passion for competitive swimming. Michael and I celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary, marveling at the life we had built together. On quiet evenings, I sometimes reflected on the strange, painful journey that had led us here. How tragedy had transformed into blessing. How betrayal had opened the door to deeper love. How the family we chose had proven stronger than the family we were born into. Ethan summed it up best during a rare philosophical conversation late one night as we sat on the porch after everyone else had gone to bed. You know what I've learned from all this, he asked, watching the stars? That some people cannot be saved from themselves. That forgiveness is something you do for your own peace, not for the other person's comfort. And that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about who chooses to love you when loving you is hard. I squeezed his hand, this remarkable man who had once been a frightened, sick little boy. I would choose you again, I told him. Every single time. I know, he smiled. That's what makes you my mom. As I end this story, I want to ask you, have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to something better in your life? Have you found the strength to rebuild after someone walked away? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story touched you in any way, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the family we build from the ashes of heartbreak is stronger than the one we lost. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, true healing comes not from erasing the past, but from creating a future where it no longer controls you.